The courtroom was silent. Every pair of eyes was locked on the judge as he glared down at the teenager standing before him. The boy, Noah Carter, had barely spoken a word since stepping inside. His hands were stuffed into his hoodie pockets, his messy brown hair falling over part of his face, making his expression unreadable. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't afraid. He was just there. Judge Holloway, a man infamous for his sharp tongue and impatience, let out a dry scoff. He leaned forward, looking at Noah the way someone might examine a piece of gum stuck to their shoe. Well, the judge drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What do we have here? A kid too scared to speak? Or do you just have no clue what's going on? Laughter rippled through the courtroom, but Noah didn't even blink. Judge Holloway smirked. Let me guess. You're one of those kids who think they're smarter than everyone else, huh? He leaned back, shaking his head in mock disappointment. Let me tell you something, son. Kids like you go nowhere. You waste people's time. Do you even have a brain in that head of yours, or is it just empty space? A few quiet chuckles echoed around the room. Then Noah did something no one expected. He slowly lifted his head and locked eyes with the judge, and then he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, but his words, they made the entire courtroom go silent. Actually, Your Honor, Noah said, if you're done mocking me, I'd like to correct the mistake in your ruling, before you send an innocent man to prison. Judge Holloway's face paled. Gasps filled the room. The lawyers at the table snapped their heads toward Noah so fast it was a miracle they didn't break their necks. That was the moment everyone realized. Noah Carter wasn't just some quiet kid. He was a genius. At the back of Westbridge High School's classroom, Noah Carter sat hunched over his notebook, scribbling equations while the rest of the class gossiped, passed notes, and laughed. He barely paid attention. He had long since accepted that he didn't fit in. It wasn't that he didn't want friends. It was just that every time he spoke, people either got confused or lost interest. So over time, he stopped trying. Instead, he buried himself in books on quantum physics, logic puzzles, and programming challenges. When that wasn't enough, he tested himself by hacking into random systems, never for anything illegal, just to see if he could. But life at home? That was a different challenge. His mom, Rebecca Carter, worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. His father had walked out years ago, leaving them with nothing but overdue bills and empty promises. Noah wanted to help, but what could a 16-year-old kid do? Then, one night, everything changed. While scrolling through legal case files, something he did for fun, he stumbled upon a case that made his stomach twist. A man named Marcus Hale was about to be sent to prison for a crime he didn't commit. Noah didn't know Marcus, but the evidence against him was flawed. The prosecution had overlooked something. A mistake so small, yet so critical, that it could mean the difference between freedom and a life sentence. Noah stayed up all night, digging deeper. He analyzed documents, checked timestamps, even accessed court records that weren't meant to be public. By sunrise, he had proof. But there was one problem. Who would believe a 16-year-old nobody? For days, Noah tried reaching out to lawyers, reporters, anyone who would listen. No one did, until one desperate phone call changed everything. His mother, Rebecca, exhausted from work, barely had the energy to argue when Noah insisted they go to the courthouse. This is insane. Noah, she sighed, rubbing her temples. You're not a lawyer, you're a kid. But I'm right. Noah shot back. Mom, I can prove it. Against her better judgment, she took him. That's how Noah Carter ended up in Judge Holloway's courtroom, standing before a room full of people who had already dismissed him before he even spoke. Where a man's fate hung in the balance. Where a boy no one took seriously was about to change everything. But just as Noah was about to reveal what he had found, the courtroom doors burst open. 2 officers rushed in, hands on their weapons. Step away from the bench, now! One of them shouted. Noah froze. His mother let out a gasp. Judge Holloway's expression twisted from pale to furious. What is the meaning of this? One of the officers pointed straight at Noah. This kid hacked into the court's database. We have reason to believe he's been illegally accessing classified files. A wave of shock rippled through the room. Noah's heart pounded. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't the one who should be in trouble. He was trying to stop a mistake, not commit one. But now, instead of proving Marcus Hale's innocence, Noah Carter was about to be arrested. The cold steel of the handcuffs snapped around his wrists. His pulse thundered in his ears, but he forced himself to stay calm. Around him, chaos erupted, his mother shouting, the audience whispering in shock, the judge slamming his gavel. Order! Order in the court! Judge Holloway barked, his face red with fury. He turned to the officers, voice tight with barely controlled anger. "You're telling me," the judge growled, "this boy, this quiet, unremarkable teenager, hacked into government records?" Noah took a slow breath. He had a choice: deny everything and hope they let him go, or tell the truth and risk everything. He made his decision. He chose the truth. This boy, this quiet, unremarkable teenager, hacked into government files? Judge Holloway's voice boomed through the courtroom, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and outrage. "Yes, Your Honor," one of the officers confirmed. "We received a security alert about an unauthorized breach in the system. We traced it back to this kid's laptop." From the audience, Rebecca Carter shot to her feet, her voice shaking. "This is a mistake," she cried. "My son isn't a criminal. He was just trying to help." But Noah remained eerily calm. He slowly turned to face Judge Holloway, his voice unwavering. "Your Honor," Noah said, "if you'll just let me explain." "Silence!" the judge roared, rubbing his temples, clearly trying to process what he had just heard. He let out a slow breath before fixing Noah with a piercing glare. "You're telling me you hacked into court records?" Noah took a deep breath. This was it. He had a choice: deny everything and hope they let him go, or admit the truth and risk everything. He chose the truth. "Yes, Your Honor," Noah said firmly. "I accessed the case files, but not to cause harm." His voice remained steady. "I found an error in your ruling. If you send Marcus Hale to prison, you'll be punishing an innocent man." The courtroom fell completely silent. Even Judge Holloway hesitated, momentarily taken aback by Noah's confidence. A sharp scoff broke the tension. The prosecutor, Attorney Caldwell, a middle-aged man in a crisp navy suit, crossed his arms and shook his head. "And what makes you think," Caldwell sneered, "that a teenager knows more than the legal professionals who worked on this case?" Noah turned to face him, his gaze steady. "Because," Noah said, "they made a mistake, and I can prove it." Judge Holloway's eyes narrowed. "Fine," the judge said, leaning forward. "Since you seem so sure of yourself, tell me, what mistake did I make?" Noah inhaled slowly. "Your Honor," he began, "the case against Marcus Hale is built on security footage from a bank robbery. The prosecution claims the video places him at the scene at exactly 9:42 a.m. Caldwell rolled his eyes. "And?" Noah ignored him and continued, "That footage was tampered with." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Caldwell scoffed. "That's ridiculous." Noah didn't flinch. The original video file was compressed before being submitted as evidence, and when that happens, metadata gets altered. Judge Holloway frowned. "And what exactly does that mean?" Noah's voice remained clear and confident. "It means, Your Honor, that the timestamps were manipulated." Gasps spread through the room. Noah pressed on. "I ran a forensic analysis on the publicly available version of the video, and I found something strange. The lighting in the footage, the shadow angles, don't match the time of day the video claims to be from." Judge Holloway leaned forward. "Explain." Noah nodded. "The footage says it's 9:42 a.m. He paused. "But if you look at the way the shadows fall, you'll notice something strange. At that time in the morning, the sun should be coming from the east." He locked eyes with the judge. "But in this footage, the sun is positioned like it's nearly noon." The room exploded into whispers. Judge Holloway's face darkened. Noah's expression remained unreadable. "Someone, Your Honor, altered the timestamp." The courtroom buzzed with tension. Attorney Caldwell's face was now bright red. "This is absurd," he snapped. "You expect us to believe that a 16-year-old analyzed security footage better than an entire legal team?" Noah didn't blink. "You don't have to believe me," he said simply. "Just pull up the original footage from the bank's security system. Compare it to the file you received in court. If I'm wrong, I'll take full responsibility." The room fell silent again. Judge Holloway leaned back in his chair, studying Noah with new interest. The arrogance he had shown earlier, it was gone. Now there was something else in his eyes. Curiosity. After a long pause, the judge turned to one of the court officials. "Contact the bank. Request the original footage." Now. Caldwell slammed his hands on the table. Your Honor, this is a complete waste of time. Judge Holloway shot him a sharp glare. You're the one who claimed the evidence was airtight, he said coldly. So if this kid is wrong, then you have nothing to worry about, right? Caldwell clenched his jaw but said nothing. Rebecca Carter watched from the crowd, her hands clasped tightly together, her breath shallow. Minutes later, a court official rushed back in, a laptop in his hands. Your Honor, he panted, slightly out of breath. We've received a live copy of the bank's unedited footage. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Play it. The entire courtroom held its breath. The screen flickered. A black and white security video played. The interior of the bank, customers moving, tellers at their counters, and then the moment of truth. At exactly 9:42 a.m. the doors opened. A man walked inside, but it wasn't Marcus Hale. It was someone else entirely. The room erupted in gasps. Rebecca Carter's hand flew to her mouth. Caldwell turned as pale as a sheet. Judge Holloway's eyes widened. Well, the judge muttered. I'll be damned. Noah tilted his head slightly. I told you, he said simply. The timestamp was fake. Judge Holloway sat there for a long moment, his gavel hovering over his desk. Then, he turned to Caldwell. I assume, the judge said, you have an explanation for this? Caldwell stammered, his confidence gone. Your Honor, I don't understand how. Enough. Judge Holloway raised a stern hand, silencing him. Then, slowly, he turned back to Noah. You're telling me, the judge said carefully, that you figured this out on your own? Noah nodded. Yes, sir. The judge studied him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he let out a low chuckle. Well, I'll be damned, Judge Holloway muttered again. In 20 years on the bench, I've never seen anything like this. His gaze shifted to the officers still standing beside Noah. Get those cuffs off him, now. The officers hesitated for a split second. Then they obeyed. The cold steel unclicked from Noah's wrists. As he rubbed at the red marks on his skin, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over yet. His mother was staring at him like he was a stranger. Judge Holloway cleared his throat, shifting in his chair. I will personally see to it that Marcus Hale's case is reviewed immediately, he said. Then, his gaze returned to Noah, his tone unreadable. As for you, young man, I don't know whether to scold you for hacking into court records or offer you a job. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Noah gave a small shrug. I'm not looking for a job, he said simply. I just didn't want to see an innocent man go to prison. Judge Holloway nodded slowly. You've got guts, kid. And one hell of a brain. For the first time that day, it felt like Noah could finally breathe. But before anyone could celebrate, the courtroom doors burst open. A man in a black suit stormed in, his face unreadable. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The light-hearted moment evaporated, replaced with something much heavier. He walked straight to the judge, leaned down, and whispered something into his ear. Noah watched as Judge Holloway's expression changed. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of his desk. When he turned back to Noah, the sharp arrogance from before was gone, replaced by something colder. Something more serious. Young man, the judge said carefully. Noah tensed. I need you to come with us, right now. Noah frowned. Why? Judge Holloway's voice was grave. Because, he said, it turns out you weren't the only one looking at that case. Noah's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Something big. And before he could even process what that meant, 2 more officers stepped forward. But this time, they weren't here because of some misunderstanding. They were here for something much, much worse. Noah barely had time to react before the officers flanked him, their expressions unreadable. His mother let out a panicked cry, reaching for him, but one of the officers held up a hand. Ma'am, stay back, the taller one ordered. Rebecca Carter's voice shook. What are you doing? You just cleared him. He didn't do anything wrong. Wrong, Judge Holloway said, his voice firm. The judge's usual arrogance was gone, replaced with something much more serious. He turned to Noah. Son, you need to come with us, now. Noah's brain moved fast. Judge Holloway wasn't just being stern. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't mocking him anymore. That meant whatever was happening, it was bigger than just the courtroom. Noah met his mother's worried gaze and gave her the smallest nod. Then he turned back to the judge. All right, he said, forcing his voice to stay even. But you need to tell me what's going on. The man in the black suit, the one who had whispered to the judge, stepped forward. He had slicked back hair, a perfectly pressed tie, and the kind of blank expression that only came from years of keeping secrets. "My name is Agent Whitaker," he said smoothly. "I work for the federal government." Noah's heart skipped a beat. The feds. Whitaker reached into his coat, pulled out a tablet, and swiped through a few images. Then he turned the screen so that Noah could see. The second Noah's eyes landed on it, he felt the breath leave his lungs. Noah sat in his tiny bedroom, his laptop screen the only source of light. For the past few nights, he had been obsessed with Marcus Hale's case. He had combed through legal documents, analyzed security footage, and pulled up archived records that most people didn't even know existed. He wasn't trying to break the law, he was just looking for the truth. But then, something strange happened. When Noah hacked into the courthouse database, he expected to find Marcus Hale's original case files. Instead, what he found didn't make sense. The file had a security tag on it. That wasn't normal. Court records weren't supposed to have that level of protection unless they were classified. And yet, every time he tried to access it, the system flagged him. That's when he realized something was off. Someone didn't want this case reviewed. And whoever they were, they had the power to hide it at the highest level. Noah spent the next hour trying to bypass the alert. He wasn't trying to cover his tracks. He just wanted to know why this particular case had been flagged. Then, suddenly, his screen went black. A single message appeared in red text. "Access restricted, trace initiated." Noah's stomach dropped. He had triggered something big. He moved fast, hands flying over the keyboard, trying to shut everything down. But before he could, the power in his house flickered. For 10 full seconds, the entire place went dark. When the lights came back on, Noah knew someone was coming for him. Now standing in the middle of the courtroom, staring at Agent Whitaker's tablet, Noah understood everything. This wasn't just about Marcus Hale. Someone had flagged that case for a reason. And in trying to uncover the truth, Noah had stumbled into something much, much bigger. Noah had tripped over something much bigger than he ever expected. Agent Whitaker slipped the tablet back into his coat, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice steady, "you accessed files belonging to the federal government. That's a serious offense." Noah swallowed, but forced himself to keep his face neutral. "I wasn't trying to do anything illegal," he said. "I just wanted to know why an innocent man was being set up." Whitaker's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's exactly what we need to talk about." Judge Holloway stood, rubbing his chin. "Agent Whitaker, I assume this conversation isn't meant to happen here." Whitaker nodded. "We need to move him to a secure location." Rebecca Carter stepped in front of her son, her hands trembling. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "You're not taking my son anywhere. He's just a kid." Whitaker held her gaze. "Ma'am," he said, and to Noah's surprise his voice softened. "I promise you, he's not in trouble, but he is in danger. And if you want to keep him safe, he needs to come with us now." Rebecca hesitated. Noah could see the terror in her eyes. He reached out, gently squeezing her hand. "Mom," he said softly. "I'll be okay." She shook her head, her breathing shaky. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why is this happening?" Noah turned back to Whitaker. "Yeah," he said, his voice sharp. "Why is this happening?" Whitaker glanced around the room, then lowered his voice. "Because, kid," he said, his tone grave. "The case you just exposed, it wasn't just a mistake." Noah's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Whitaker's eyes were dead serious. "I mean," he said slowly, "someone wanted Marcus Hale in prison. And if you figured that out, then you just got in the way of something dangerous." Then, bang. A gunshot echoed through the courthouse. Screams erupted. People dived for cover. Rebecca yanked Noah down just as a second shot rang out. The courtroom doors flew open, and a man in a dark hoodie charged inside, gun raised. Whitaker grabbed his radio. "We have a breach. We need backup now." The gunman didn't hesitate. He locked eyes with Noah and ran straight at him. Noah's body tensed. This wasn't just about arresting him anymore. They weren't trying to stop him. They were trying to kill him. The world moved in slow motion. Noah barely had time to react before the gunman lunged toward him. His heart pounded as he ducked, feeling the heat of a bullet whiz past his ear. The deafening crack of the gunshot rang through the air, followed by panicked screams. "Get down," Whitaker bellowed, drawing his weapon in a flash. Rebecca clung to Noah, her arms wrapped tightly around him. Noah, she sobbed. Stay down, baby, please. But Noah knew. This wasn't random. This was targeted. They wanted him gone. Judge Holloway dove behind the bench, cursing under his breath. Court officers scrambled for their weapons, but the shooter was fast. Weaving through the chaos, his eyes locked on Noah. He's here for me. The realization sent a cold shock through Noah's spine. The gunman raised his weapon again and fired. At the last second, a strong hand yanked Noah backward. The bullet shattered the wooden railing where he had been standing just moments ago. It was Whitaker. Move, the agent barked, shoving Noah toward the exit. We're getting out of here, now. Two court officers tackled the gunman, wrestling him to the ground. The gun clattered across the floor, but Noah knew. It wasn't over. If there was one assassin, there could be more. Whitaker grabbed Noah's wrist, pulling him toward the side door of the courtroom. Get him out of here, he shouted to another agent, shoving Noah into the man's arms. Rebecca tried to follow, but Whitaker held her back. Ma'am, he said, his voice firm. We'll keep him safe. Stay down. Noah's heart screamed no, but he knew arguing would only slow them down. The agent practically carried him as they ran through a back hallway, his pulse hammering. Behind them, the sound of police sirens roared outside the courthouse. Noah gasped for breath. Who was that? The agent's grip on his arm tightened. Someone who doesn't want you alive. Minutes later, Noah was shoved into the back of a black SUV. The doors slammed shut, and the tires screeched as they sped away from the courthouse. Whitaker climbed into the passenger seat, breathing heavily. He turned to the driver. Any sign of pursuit? All clear, the driver replied. For now. Noah pressed his palms against the cool leather seat, trying to steady his breathing. His hands were still shaking. His mind raced. He had just been shot at. They tried to kill him. This wasn't just about Marcus Hale anymore. Can someone please tell me what's going on? He demanded. Whitaker exhaled, rubbing his temples. You don't get it, kid, he said. That wasn't just some random shooter. He turned in his seat, locking eyes with Noah. Someone powerful is watching you. Noah clenched his fists. Then tell me what it is. Whitaker hesitated. He studied Noah for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. Marcus Hale's case, he said. It wasn't just a setup. Noah's pulse quickened. Whitaker's voice dropped lower. It was a cover-up. Noah swallowed hard. A cover-up for what? Whitaker's expression darkened. For something, he said, that people would kill to keep buried. Noah felt his stomach twist. Who? He whispered. Whitaker turned to face him fully. I don't know yet. His voice was grim. But we're about to find out. The SUV sped toward an unknown destination, carrying Noah Carter deeper into a conspiracy that could either expose the truth or get him killed. And at this point, he wasn't sure which would come first. The vehicle tore down the highway, weaving through traffic like a shark cutting through water. Noah could feel the tension in the air. Agent Whitaker sat in the front seat, his eyes flicking to the side mirrors every few seconds, scanning for any sign they were being followed. Noah's mind raced. Someone had tried to kill him, not scare him, not warn him, kill him. And now he was in a speeding vehicle with a federal agent, a man who might be the only person keeping him alive. He took a deep breath. Where are we going? Whitaker didn't take his eyes off the road. Somewhere safe. Noah frowned. That's not an answer. Whitaker let out a long sigh. Kid, he said, you need to understand something. You're in the middle of something way bigger than you realize. The people behind this, they don't play games. Noah clenched his fists. Then tell me what I stepped into. Whitaker hesitated. Then, after a long pause, he finally spoke. The case you cracked? Marcus Hale's case? He exhaled. It wasn't just a small-time mistake. Noah's breath caught in his throat. Sealed by who? He asked. Whitaker's voice turned grave. By someone in the government. A chill ran down Noah's spine. That doesn't make sense. He shook his head. Why would the government want to frame an innocent man? Whitaker's expression darkened. It's not about him, he said. It's about what he saw. Noah sat up straighter. What do you mean? Whitaker gripped the steering wheel tighter. Marcus Hale wasn't just some random guy. He glanced at Noah. He was an auditor, and 3 months ago he found something. Noah's pulse quickened. What? A discrepancy in federal funds. Whitaker's tone was sharp. Millions of dollars gone. Noah felt his stomach turn. Someone was stealing money. Whitaker nodded, and they didn't want him to talk. Noah swallowed hard. So they framed him. Made him look like a criminal. Whitaker exhaled. Exactly. Noah ran a hand through his hair. His mind was moving 1,000 miles a minute, but if he had figured that out, then the people behind it knew he knew. Whitaker's silence was all the confirmation he needed. Noah was in serious danger. The SUV swerved off the highway, turning onto a secluded road leading deep into the woods. A few minutes later, a small, worn-out cabin came into view. The driver killed the engine, and Whitaker turned to Noah. "For now," he said, "this is where you stay." Noah stared at the cabin. "Seriously?" he muttered. "A creepy cabin in the middle of nowhere?" Whitaker smirked. "What were you expecting, a 5-star hotel?" Noah sighed. "Fine, but I'm going to need my laptop." Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "For what?" Noah's voice was steady. "If someone in the government is behind this, then I'm going to find them." Whitaker's smirk faded. "Kid," he said, his tone serious, "you don't understand what you're dealing with." Noah met his gaze. "I think I do." Whitaker studied him for a long moment. Then, finally, he sighed. "You're either the smartest kid I've ever met," he muttered, "or the dumbest." Noah shrugged. "Probably both." Whitaker chuckled, shaking his head. "Get inside. I'll get your laptop." Noah stepped out of the SUV and into the unknown. But one thing was clear. He wasn't running. He was going to fight back, and he was going to expose the truth, no matter what it took. The cabin smelled like old wood and dust. Noah stepped inside, glancing around. It was small, just a single room with a bed, a desk, and a rusty stove in the corner. A few maps and papers were scattered across the table, but otherwise, it was empty. He turned to Whitaker, who locked the door behind them. "So what now?" Whitaker walked to a small cabinet, pulled out a metal box, and placed it on the table. He opened it, revealing a satellite phone, a gun, and a few stacks of files. "We lay low," Whitaker said, "at least until I can figure out who's behind this." Noah crossed his arms. "You're telling me to do nothing?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Noah scowled. "That's not happening." Whitaker gave him a look. "Kid, I just pulled you out of a courtroom where someone tried to put a bullet in your head. You don't get to argue with me." Noah exhaled sharply. He understood the danger. But doing nothing wasn't an option. He walked over to the desk and sat down. Whitaker tossed a duffel bag onto the bed. "Everything you need is in there. Laptop, chargers, burner phone," he said. His tone sharpened. "You do anything stupid, I pull the plug." Noah unzipped the bag, pulling out his laptop. The glow of the screen lit up his face. This was home. Whitaker sat across from him, watching carefully. "What's your plan?" Noah's fingers danced over the keyboard. "Simple. If Marcus Hale found something before they framed him, then the records are still out there." His eyes narrowed. "I just have to follow the trail." Whitaker leaned back. "And what if you find something they don't want you to see?" Noah didn't hesitate. "Then I'll make sure the whole world sees it." 2 hours later, Noah was buried deep in the system. He had bypassed 3 firewalls, rerouted his connection through encrypted servers, and now he was staring at something that made his breath hitch. A list. Thousands of transactions, large sums of money moving in and out of private accounts. But the names attached to them? They weren't random people. They were government officials. Whitaker stood behind him, arms crossed. "You just found the smoking gun, didn't you?" Noah's pulse raced as he scrolled through the files. "This isn't just fraud." His voice was barely above a whisper. "This is a money laundering operation. Funds being stolen from government programs and funneled into private accounts." He shook his head. "It's massive." Whitaker's expression darkened. "How far up does it go?" Noah clicked on a file labeled Priority 1. The screen loaded, and a single name appeared at the top. Whitaker sucked in a sharp breath. "No way." Noah's hands tightened into fists. The name on the screen wasn't just some corrupt official. It was someone at the highest level of government, a senator. Whitaker's voice dropped to a whisper. "If this gets out, it could bring down an entire branch of power." Noah looked up at him, which is why they were willing to kill to keep it buried. Before Whitaker could respond, the cabin lights flickered. Noah's screen glitched for a split second. Then, a single warning popped up. "You have been detected." Noah's blood turned to ice. Whitaker grabbed his gun. "They found us." Outside, the sound of tires screeching on gravel sent a wave of adrenaline through Noah's body. Headlights cut through the trees, black SUVs, more than one. Whitaker moved fast, shoving papers into a bag. "We're leaving, now." Noah slammed his laptop shut and grabbed the duffel. How did they track us? Whitaker gritted his teeth. Doesn't matter. Move. The first SUV doors swung open, mouthing. Armed men stepped out, dressed in black tactical gear. No badges, no insignia. They weren't police. They were something worse. Noah's chest tightened. Whoever these people were, they weren't here to arrest him. They were here to erase him. Whitaker grabbed Noah's arm. We're going out the back. Don't stop running. Noah swallowed hard and nodded. Then, the first bullet shattered the cabin window. Shards of glass exploded into the room. Noah ducked, his heart hammering in his chest. Go, Whitaker shouted, yanking him toward the back door. The second bullet tore into the wall near Noah's head, splintering the wood. There was no more time. Whitaker shoved the door open, and they sprinted into the dense forest. The ground was uneven, covered in roots and damp leaves. Noah struggled to keep up, his breath coming in short gasps. Behind them, voices shouted, "They're on the move! Take them down!" A third gunshot rang out. The bullet slammed into a tree, just inches from Noah's shoulder. He forced himself to run faster. He had no idea where they were going. All he knew was, if they stopped, they were dead. Whitaker veered to the right, pushing Noah ahead. Keep running. Don't look back. Noah's legs burned, but he didn't stop. He ducked under branches, leaped over fallen logs, and pushed through the thick undergrowth. The sound of boots pounding against the forest floor grew closer. Noah gasped. They're gaining on us. Whitaker cursed under his breath. We need to lose them. They reached a small clearing, and suddenly Whitaker grabbed Noah's arm, yanking him down behind a large fallen tree. He placed a finger to his lips. Stay quiet. Noah crouched low, his pulse hammering. The men chasing them weren't amateurs. They moved in formation, their weapons sweeping through the trees. The voices were too close now. They couldn't have gone far. Sweep the area. They're here somewhere. Noah held his breath. The duffel bag was still slung over his shoulder. His laptop was inside. But he knew any sound would give them away. Whitaker slowly pulled out his handgun and whispered, "If they find us, we fight." Noah's throat went dry. He wasn't a fighter. He was just a kid who got too curious. But now he was in the middle of something real. The footsteps grew louder. Noah's heart pounded. His fingers gripped the rough bark of the tree. Then, a flashlight beam swept inches from their hiding spot. Noah held his breath. If they were found, they wouldn't make it out alive. The men were just feet away. Noah held his breath. Then, a voice crackled over a radio. "Pull back. We've got movement near the main road." One of the men hesitated. Could be a decoy. The radio crackled again. "Doesn't matter. We need to go." A long pause. Then, the footsteps started retreating. Noah didn't move. He barely breathed. Beside him, Whitaker stayed still, gun in hand, watching the figures disappear into the darkness. They waited. 1 minute. 2. Finally, Whitaker exhaled. "They're gone." Noah let out a shaky breath. That was close. Whitaker scanned the area, his expression grim. Too close. He turned to Noah. "Come on. We need to keep moving." Noah swallowed hard and nodded. They weren't safe, not yet. An hour later, they reached a deserted service road. Whitaker led Noah to a hidden vehicle, a dark SUV parked under thick brush. Popping the trunk, Whitaker pulled out a fresh set of clothes and tossed them to Noah. "Put these on." Noah looked down at himself. His hoodie was torn. His jeans were covered in mud. He hadn't even realized how much of a mess he was. He changed quickly, then climbed into the passenger seat. Whitaker slid behind the wheel and started the engine. Noah turned to him. "Where are we going now?" Whitaker's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Somewhere they won't find us." Noah narrowed his eyes. "And then what?" Whitaker sighed. "Then we figure out who's behind this." Noah's mind raced. They had seen the evidence. They knew a senator was involved, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Who else was part of this? And more importantly, how far would they go to keep their secrets buried? The SUV rumbled down the road, disappearing into the night. Noah knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not even close. The SUV sliced through the darkness, headlights illuminating the empty road ahead. Noah sat in the passenger seat, gripping his laptop. He kept replaying everything in his mind. The attack at the courthouse, the discovery of the senator's name in the files, the men who had just tried to kill them. His hands trembled slightly. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't a spy or a fugitive. He was just a kid who loved puzzles. A kid who had seen something he wasn't supposed to see. Whitaker noticed his shaking hands. "Breathe, kid," he said. "You freeze up, you die. Stay sharp." Noah exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. "Where are we even going?" Whitaker's jaw clenched. "Safe house about 50 miles from here. No electronics, no connection, no trace." Noah frowned. "You don't trust me?" Whitaker shot him a look. "Not the issue. You just hacked into the highest levels of government, and someone found us within minutes." His voice was grim. "They have eyes everywhere. We go off the grid now." Noah hated the idea of hiding, but even he had to admit, Whitaker had a point. The people coming after them weren't amateurs. They had resources, they had power, and worst of all, they had no problem killing to protect their secrets. The SUV hit a rough patch of road, bouncing slightly. Noah tightened his grip on the laptop. "So," he said, "what's the plan?" Whitaker kept his eyes on the road. "We lay low. I make some calls, figure out who we can trust." Noah shook his head. "That's not good enough." Whitaker exhaled sharply. "Kid, I know you think you're some kind of genius." Noah interrupted him. "I am a genius." Whitaker scoffed. Noah's voice hardened. "And I'm telling you, hiding won't fix this." He leaned forward. "We have the proof. We have the names. We expose them." Whitaker let out a short laugh. "Expose them to who?" He shook his head. "You think the news is going to run with this? You think the cops are going to arrest a senator?" His voice dropped. "This is bigger than that. Corruption this deep has protection." He looked at Noah. "You go to the wrong person and you'll just make yourself a bigger target." Noah was silent. He hated to admit it. But Whitaker was right. They couldn't just upload the files to the internet and hope for the best. They needed a strategy. Noah tapped his fingers against his laptop, thinking. Then an idea struck him. "What if we find a weak link?" Whitaker glanced at him. "What?" Noah sat up straighter. "People don't pull off crimes this big alone." He turned to Whitaker. "If we can find someone connected to the operation, but lower level, someone who's scared, then we flip them." Whitaker nodded slowly. "Get them to talk." Noah smirked. "Exactly." Whitaker was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head with a small chuckle. "You're a dangerous kid." Noah raised an eyebrow. "Because I'm smart?" Whitaker shook his head. "Because you don't know when to stop." Noah just stared ahead. Stopping wasn't an option. Not anymore. The gas station sat on a deserted stretch of road, the only light coming from a flickering neon sign and the dim glow of a security camera above the door. Whitaker shut off the engine. "Stay here. I'll grab supplies." Noah nodded, watching as Whitaker stepped out of the SUV and walked toward the store. The moment he was alone, Noah opened his laptop. He wasn't waiting around. If they were going to flip someone inside this operation, they needed to know who to target. His fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up encrypted files. He scrolled past the senator's transactions, looking for something. Anything that stood out. Then he saw it. A name. Jacob Finch. Noah clicked on it. A small profile popped up. Finch was a mid-level government contractor, tied to financial accounts used in the laundering scheme. He wasn't at the top, but he was close enough to know who was. And then Noah saw something else. His eyes widened. He tried to back out. A series of flagged transactions showed Finch moving money, shifting assets, trying to disappear. He was scared. Noah's pulse quickened. This was it. Finch wanted out, which meant if they got to him first, they had a shot. Noah reached for his burner phone. He needed to tell Whitaker. Then, he saw the reflection in the window. A shadow moved toward the SUV. Noah's stomach dropped. Before he could even turn, a hand slammed over his mouth. The door yanked open. Noah struggled, kicking wildly, but whoever it was strong. He was ripped from the SUV and thrown into the darkness. Noah hit the ground hard, his head slamming against the rough gravel. Stars exploded in his vision. For a brief second he felt completely disoriented, but he didn't have time to recover. A strong hand grabbed his collar, yanking him up. A low, sharp voice hissed in his ear. "Stop fighting." Noah ignored the command. He twisted and thrashed, kicking his attacker's shin, but they barely flinched. A second figure appeared from the shadows. This one pressed a gun against Noah's ribs. "Do it again and you won't get another chance." Noah froze. The first man, still gripping him tightly, leaned in. "You've been a very busy little hacker, haven't you?" Noah clenched his teeth. He could smell cigarettes and sweat on the guy's breath. Whoever these men were, they weren't ordinary thugs. They were professionals. The second man grabbed Noah's laptop bag from the SUV, slinging it over his shoulder. "Where's your babysitter?" Noah's heart pounded. Whitaker was still inside the gas station. If these guys had been watching them, they would have seen Whitaker go in alone. That meant they waited for the perfect moment to grab me. The first man shoved Noah toward a black sedan parked in the alley beside the station. "Get in." Noah hesitated. The second man jabbed the gun harder into his ribs. I said, "Get in." Noah didn't have a choice. He climbed into the back seat, his brain racing for a way out. The first man slid in beside him. The second took the driver's seat. The doors locked with a click. And then they sped off into the night. 5 minutes. That's how long Noah sat in silence, trying to memorize every turn, every street sign, anything that could tell him where they were going. The man next to him finally spoke. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Noah swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "That's not important." Noah glanced at the driver. "You work for the senator." The man beside him scoffed. The driver muttered, "Shut up." Bingo. Noah had hit a nerve. These men weren't just random kidnappers. They were connected to the corruption he had uncovered, which meant they weren't planning on letting him go. Noah took a slow breath. He needed to stay calm. If he panicked, he'd make a mistake. His eyes flicked to his laptop bag now on the floor by the driver's seat. If he could just get to it, then. The car suddenly jerked. Tires screeched as the driver slammed on the brakes. A black SUV blocked the road ahead. Noah's pulse spiked. Whitaker. Before the driver could react, the SUV's door flew open, and Whitaker stepped out. Gun raised, eyes burning with fury. "Let him go." His voice was cold, lethal. The man beside Noah pulled out a pistol, shoving it against Noah's temple. Whitaker's jaw tightened. "I don't think you understand," the man sneered. "You lower that gun, or the kid gets a bullet." Noah's breath came fast. His mind raced for a way out. Then Whitaker did something unexpected. He smirked. The driver's eyes darted to the rearview mirror, breath suddenly suspicious. "What's so funny?" Whitaker tilted his head slightly. "You boys brought a gun to a fight? You already lost." The men barely had time to process those words before a second SUV slammed into them from behind. The impact sent the car spinning. The man next to Noah lost his grip. And Noah acted instantly. He lunged for his laptop bag. The driver cursed, struggling to regain control. Noah didn't wait. This was his chance, and he was taking it. The car spun out of control, tires screeching against the pavement. Then, Whitaker was there. He yanked open the door, ripped Noah out, and dragged him to safety just as the second SUV screeched to a stop beside them. More men poured out, but these weren't enemies. They were agents. Whitaker had backup. Then, gunfire erupted. Whitaker shoved Noah behind the SUV. "Stay down." Noah barely had time to process before he heard the distinct pop, 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 silenced gunfire. The men who had taken him were outnumbered, and within seconds, it was over. The only sound left was the pounding of Noah's heart. Whitaker turned to him, gripping his shoulder. "You okay?" Noah nodded, breathing hard. Then, realization hit him. His eyes narrowed. "You set me up." Whitaker smirked. "Had a feeling they'd come for you. Just needed to make sure I'd be there when they did." Noah stared at him. "You used me as bait." Whitaker shrugged. And it worked. Noah couldn't decide if he was angry or impressed. One of the agents from the second SUV approached. "We need to move, now." Whitaker nodded and turned to Noah. "Come on, kid. We're not done yet." Noah swallowed hard. He knew what Whitaker meant. This was just the beginning. And now, they were going straight to the source, straight to the senator. The black SUVs tore down the highway at full speed, weaving between cars like the laws of the road didn't apply. Noah sat in the back, his laptop balanced on his knees, fingers flying over the keyboard. They had the advantage now. They had the files. They had the proof. And most importantly, they had names. But there was still one major problem. None of it mattered unless they could bring down the senator. Whitaker, sitting in the passenger seat, was making rapid calls, his voice sharp. "No, we don't go public yet. We need a direct approach. If we don't cut off the head, they'll bury this." Noah swallowed hard. He understood what Whitaker meant. If they just leaked the information, the people behind the senator would shut it down. Twist the story, or make it disappear. They needed to corner him. "We need to get to him before he knows we have this," Noah said. Whitaker nodded, already working on it. Then, the driver, a serious-looking agent with sharp eyes, spoke up. "We got a problem." Whitaker stiffened. "What?" The agent handed him a tablet. Noah leaned in and his blood turned to ice. On the screen, a breaking news alert flashed in bold red letters. Teen hacker wanted for cybercrimes. FBI issues arrest warrant. Whitaker cursed under his breath. "They're flipping it on you." Noah's stomach churned as he read the article. They had painted him as a dangerous cybercriminal, claimed he had hacked into classified government systems. The news was calling him an immediate national security threat. And worse, they tied Whitaker to him. Whitaker's face was grim. "This is bad." The agent driving nodded. "We're losing ground. They'll have orders to detain on sight." Noah clenched his fists. This was exactly what he feared. They weren't just trying to silence him. They were making sure no one would believe him. Whitaker muttered under his breath, "They're cutting off our options." Noah took a deep breath. "Then, we only have one move left." Whitaker glanced at him. "Which is?" Noah's fingers tightened around the laptop. "We trapped the senator." Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "You got a plan, kid?" Noah exhaled. "Yeah, but it's risky." Whitaker smirked. "Risky is what we do." 30 minutes later, they pulled into a private airfield. A sleek black jet sat on the runway, engines humming. Agents moved swiftly, prepping for takeoff. Noah turned to Whitaker, confused. "Where are we going?" Whitaker tightened his grip on his gun. "Washington, D.C." Noah's stomach twisted. They were going straight into the lion's den. Before he could say anything, Whitaker grabbed his arm. "Listen up, kid. The second we land, this gets real." His voice was dead serious. "No more games. No more running. We hit hard. We hit fast." He locked eyes with Noah, "And we don't stop until the truth is out." Noah nodded, forcing down the fear bubbling inside him. They climbed the stairs into the jet, and within minutes, they were airborne. Noah opened his laptop and pulled up the files. There was one last piece of the puzzle he needed to crack, and if he was right, it would be the final nail in the senator's coffin. He took a deep breath and started typing. They were heading straight into danger, and there was no turning back now. Noah's fingers flew across the keyboard, his mind moving faster than ever. He wasn't just hacking now, he was building a trap. Whitaker sat beside him, watching carefully. "What exactly are you doing, kid?" Noah's eyes stayed locked on the screen, setting up the endgame. He pulled up Senator Calloway's financial records again, but this time, he wasn't just looking at the stolen money, he was looking at who was receiving it. Then, his breath hitched. Whitaker leaned in. "What is it?" Noah swallowed hard. "The money isn't just going into offshore accounts. Some of it is coming back." Whitaker frowned. "Explain." Noah exhaled. "It's being funneled through shell companies, fake businesses, and then it's being used for something big." He clicked on one of the flagged transactions, a series of payments, massive amounts of money, and the recipient, a private security firm. Whitaker's expression darkened. "That's not just laundering, that's building an army." Noah's stomach twisted. "He's not just stealing money," his voice was quiet. "He's paying for something. Weapons, men, operations, something off the books." Whitaker ran a hand down his face. "This is worse than I thought," Noah nodded. They weren't just exposing corruption anymore. His eyes met Whitaker's. "We're stopping a coup." 1 hour later, the jet touched down at a private airstrip outside Washington, D.C. The moment the wheels hit the ground, the team was already in motion. Whitaker loaded his gun. "We don't have much time. The second they realize we're here, they'll move to shut this down." Noah nodded. "We need to get close to the senator, somewhere public, somewhere they can't just kill us." Whitaker thought for a moment, then his eyes lit up. "The gala." Noah frowned. "What gala?" Whitaker pulled out his phone and showed him an article. "Tonight, Senator Calloway to speak at charity event in D.C." Noah's pulse spiked. Calloway was going to be in public, surrounded by hundreds of people. It was the perfect chance. Noah shut his laptop. "Then we go to the gala," Whitaker smirked. "One problem, kid. You don't exactly blend in at high-class events." Noah exhaled. "Then I guess it's time for a makeover." 1 hour later, Noah stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the cuffs of a stolen tuxedo. "This is stupid," he muttered. Whitaker, fixing his own tie, smirked. "Relax, kid. You almost look normal." Noah rolled his eyes. "What's the plan?" Whitaker's face grew serious. "You get in, stick to the plan, and don't get caught." Noah nodded. "Right." Whitaker glanced at his watch. "It's almost showtime." Noah took a deep breath. This was it. The final move. And if they pulled this off, the senator was finished. They stepped into the grand ballroom. A massive chandelier glittered overhead. The room was filled with politicians, businessmen, and high-profile guests. Everyone was smiling, laughing, completely clueless about what was about to happen. Noah's eyes scanned the crowd. Then he saw him, Senator Calloway, standing at the center of the room, shaking hands, laughing, completely unaware that his empire was about to crumble. Noah's heart pounded. It was time. He pulled out his phone, clicked a button, and sent the files to every major news outlet in the country. Then, before he could even breathe, a firm hand grabbed his shoulder. His blood ran cold. He turned and found himself face to face with a man in black. No expression, no hesitation, just deadly intent. The man whispered, "You shouldn't have come here, kid." Noah barely had time to react before the man reached inside his jacket and pulled out a gun. Noah's world slowed. The man in black pulled his gun with surgical precision, his grip steady, too steady. A professional. Noah's body froze. His mind screamed at him to move, but he was locked in place, staring down the barrel of a silencer. Then bang! But it wasn't from the assassin's gun. The man's body jerked violently. A bullet slammed into his chest. His grip loosened. His weapon clattered to the marble floor. Noah barely had time to register what happened before. A strong hand yanked him backward. "Move!" Whitaker's voice roared in his ear. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests screamed, ducking for cover. Security rushed in, guns drawn, looking for the source of the gunfire. Noah's heart pounded. "Who shot him?" Whitaker didn't answer. He was already scanning the room, searching for their next move. Then, a new voice echoed over the ballroom speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen." Noah's head snapped toward the grand stage. There he was, Senator Calloway, standing at the podium, calm, composed, his cold blue eyes locked onto Noah through the crowd. A slow smirk formed on his lips. Noah's stomach dropped. "He knows." Calloway adjusted his tie. "Apologies for the disturbance," he said smoothly, as if nothing had happened. "It seems we have a trespasser." Whitaker cursed under his breath. "We need to get out. Now." Noah shook his head. "No." His hands curled into fists. "We finish this." Whitaker gave him a sharp look. "Kid, we—" But Noah wasn't backing down. Whitaker's voice was urgent. "Kid, we don't have backup." Noah's pulse thundered, but he didn't hesitate. "We don't need it." He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The senator raised an eyebrow as Noah emerged from the crowd. "Ah, the prodigy himself." The room went dead silent. Security guards surrounded the stage, their hands resting on their holsters. Noah ignored them. He pulled out his phone, holding it up for everyone to see. Calloway's smirk didn't falter. "You think a phone is going to stop me?" Noah smiled. "Not just a phone." He tapped the screen, and suddenly, every screen in the ballroom flickered to life. Projectors, TVs, smartphones, tablets, all of them. And on every single screen, the truth. Documents, video clips, bank statements, leaked recordings. The entire operation laid bare, for every guest, reporter, and politician in the room to see. A ripple of gasps spread through the ballroom. A man near the front dropped his champagne glass, the glass shattering against the marble floor. A reporter clutched her earpiece, already relaying the breaking news to her station. Noah's voice was calm. He gestured to the screens. "This is who you really are." For the first time, the senator looked rattled. Whitaker stepped beside Noah. "Looks like the whole country just saw what you've been hiding." Calloway's jaw tightened. He turned to his security team. "Arrest him." But no one moved, because now, the cameras were on him. The world was watching. Any wrong move would only confirm his guilt. Calloway's fists clenched, his breathing was slow and controlled. Then, his lips curled into a chilling smile. He leaned in slightly toward Noah, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand, kid." His voice was soft but deadly. "Men like me don't go to prison." Noah's eyes burned into him. His voice was steady, unshaken. "You will." Then, the doors burst open. FBI agents swarmed the room. Voices shouted, "Senator Calloway, you're under arrest." The senator barely reacted as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. His expression remained calm, but his eyes burned with pure hatred. As he was dragged away, he whispered one final warning. "This isn't over." Noah didn't flinch. He met Calloway's gaze one last time and simply said, "Yes, it is." And just like that, it was over. Hours later, Noah and Whitaker stood outside the Capitol building watching the sunrise. The world had changed overnight. News outlets were running the story. The government was in turmoil, investigations were opening, the truth was finally out. Noah let out a deep breath. So what happens now? Whitaker smirked. Now, you go home. Noah blinked. Just like that? Whitaker shrugged. You did your part. He gave a small smile. You took down one of the most powerful men in the country. His smile widened. Not bad for a kid, Noah exhaled. Yeah, not bad. He turned to Whitaker. And you? What happens to you? Whitaker chuckled. Me, I'll be fine. I always am. Noah nodded. He knew they'd probably never see each other again. But that was okay, because now, Noah Carter was free. Free from fear, free from running, free to finally be himself. As he walked away, the sun rising behind him, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just the quiet kid in the back of the class anymore. He was the kid who had changed everything. And that was just the beginning.